Hi, my friend. Welcome to the Bounce Back Black Woman podcast. I'm Dell, and I've overcome some of the most devastating heartbreaks I could ever have imagined. Do you find yourself stuck in sadness after a broken heart, asking God, why me? Well, I'm here to help women just like you heal and build the resilience to overcome life's greatest hurts. If you long for joy and confidence again, this podcast is for you. So grab your headphones and those heartbreaks. Let's talk. Well, hello, my friend, and welcome back to Bounce Back Black Woman. Today we've got a little bit different episode. I have my friend, fellow podcaster, and just champion of bouncing back because of father wounds, my friend Marselle Cook Morrison. She is joining us today, and I want to tell you a little bit about her before she comes on. She's the host of Through My Father's Eyes, which is a faith based podcast that helps women heal from father wounds and wounds of father loss and absence. She's a wife, she's a mother of four, and a proud grandmother of three. She has 3 college degrees and is also a life coach. And she has a deep passion for emotional healing, identity restoration, and helping women walk boldly in their God given purpose. She serves in leadership at her church, and she is committed to creating spaces where healing and transformation can thrive. So, welcome, Marselle. I'm so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. I'm just so excited for us to get together and oh my gosh, speak this truth.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited. And for those of you who are listening or watching, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. This is the first time I've recorded a guest on the podcast. So we're going to walk through it. So if you hear a few bumps and bruises, don't worry about it. It's all good. God has got us. So we're going to jump right in. And I have an icebreaker question for you, Marcel.
Okay.
Um, what is one song that would absolutely be on your personal bounce back playlist? You know, that kind of song that gets you through a hard day or reminds you of who you are when you really need that boost.
Um, I would have to say probably Marvin Sapp, the best to
Mm.
me.
Oh, okay. Good one.
Because God steps in to affirm us in ways, that we need,
Mm-hmm.
and so when I just think about that song, I listen to it when I'm having a hard day,
Yeah.
just things just not going right.
Mm-hmm.
I'll play that song and it just, brings me back to reality. Like God got me, you know?
Yeah, he does. And I love that you have that song like in your back pocket for when you need it. And
Mhm.
the nice thing is in today's times, because, you know, I'm older than a lot of people, you can just pull out your phone and play it. You don't have to go find an album and get it on the record player or whatever. So I
Yes.
love that. I love that. I'm going to have to listen to that because that's not one that I know.
Yes.
I was thinking about this question and a song from way back. Some of the younger folks who are listening may not even know it, but I think it's one that most women and most Black women in particular can identify with. It was Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive. And when I listen to that song, there is a line in that song that says, "It took all my strength not to fall apart, trying with all my might to mend my broken heart. I spent so many nights feeling sorry for myself, how I cried, but now I hold my head up high." And when I am like all in my feelings and all in my fears and all in my stuff, you can put that song on, and I'm telling you, transformation happens from the inside out with God's presence and
Yes.
those words of affirmation. So that's kind of my bounce back playlist, oldie
I
but
love
goodie.
that. I love
Oh,
that song because you always hear that song on so many like TV shows. And
mm-hmm.
one particular show was in Living Single. It was
Yes.
her. Yeah, Living Single. And they played that song all the time.
All the time. You know, and I love that because that show is iconic in so many ways. How many times did we see a show where there were professional black women figuring it out? And they may have
Exactly.
had their bounce backs and they had their stuff that they were carrying, but they figured it out together. And so I love the
Yes,
reference
and
to that show.
yeah,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, they always show how they came back together, even though they might have
Hmm.
fought or had a disagreement,
Right.
but they always came back at the end of the day, came
Exactly.
back in agreement with each other.
Exactly. And, another point about that that brings to mind is the power of community. I know we're going to talk a little bit later about both of our communities that we have, but that show is a perfect representation of why it's so important to do life and do your healing in
Yes,
community with other people. It doesn't always have to be people who look like you, but there is some power in healing alongside of people who can identify with your experience, your background, how you move through the world. And so
right.
that show represented a lot of that before we even realized that it represented all of that.
Exactly.
So I love that you brought that up. Love, love, love. So, all right, let's get into it. I want to learn a little bit more about your story, and I want my listeners and your listeners to hear a little bit about it. So, if I could ask you, what was your relationship with your father growing up?
Alrighty. So my relationship with my dad was like, so my dad was present, but in the era that I came up in, he was working all the time. So he gave us provision,
Mm-hmm.
so he had to go out and work. It was five siblings, so I have two sisters and two brothers, and then there was my mom, and
Mm-hmm.
then of course my grandmother. So it was eight of us in the household. So yes, it was a lot.
Yeah.
But so my dad was working like all the time. And back in that era, that's what the men did, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So anything that we needed, we went to mom for, you
Okay.
know? Um, because like I said, my dad was the provider.
Mm-hmm.
He
He
made
was
sure we
busy.
had everything. Yes,
Yeah.
and he made sure we had everything that we needed. It's just that, he was gone all the time. Like at one point he was working 7 days a week,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
yes, to just make sure that, he could provide for us,
Right.
and I honor him for that, what I'm saying, because I never understood. I used to complain, Daddy, why do you have to go to work so much? He
Mm.
said, to take care of y'all. That's
Mm-hmm.
what he would say, to take care of y'all, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, but can't we just go here? Can't we go there? He was like, what? That takes money.
Right.
I'm like, so
Right.
as a kid, what I'm saying, I didn't understand that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but like I said, my mom was like, Mom, can we have this? Mom, can, what I'm saying, we went to her for everything.
Right, right. And that story is interesting because oftentimes we think of father wounds as something that they did, which in
Right.
many cases is the truth. The wound is an
Right.
actual action or a hurtful thing, but just the absence in everyday life of a father who is working so much still
Mhm.
produces a wound of sorts. And so I think that's just a big example of how there's many different kinds of wounds and father wounds that stay with us as we grow up. So just
Right.
having him working so much and not being available to you for things that, we see on television that dads are there to do can create that wound. So that makes a lot of sense.
You know how they on TV always paints the picture.
Mm-hmm.
They always tell us like, okay, when you get older, you're gonna get married
Right.
and have the 2.5 kids and that dog and that white picket fence.
Right.
That
Brady
was the
Bunch,
picture that
the
was
Brady
painted.
Bunch.
Yes, that was the picture that was painted for us growing up,
Uh-huh.
and that's not reality.
Right. Right. So, was there like a defining moment when you realized that his being absent so much, even though it was to work and provide, that absence was hurting or shaping you in a different way?
Yes, I feel like I needed more like affirmation,
Mm,
like, who am I?
right.
You know, how are you really doing? For my dad to be like, you good?
Mm-hmm.
Or how are you really doing?
Right.
I felt that missing in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, like I said, my dad was there, but it was just like I was needing. a more tender, I guess to say like more of a tender moment with him.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
we got and I went to a couple, conventions, and one thing this pastor said was, we get the tired part of our fathers or our spouses
Mhm.
and stuff like that because their jobs get the best part of them because
Right.
they see them when they're fresh,
Right.
and we get the tired part of them. And
Yeah.
so, like when my dad would come home, Dad, can we do this? Nope,
He didn't have
mm-mm,
it. Yeah.
nope, I'm tired. I gotta go to sleep.
Right.
And we have to respect that because he didn't work all day.
Right.
So yeah, so me needing more of a, being affirmed and
Hmm.
more of a, I want to say like more hands-on.
Right. Right. And as a child, you can't really grasp the responsibility part. You just know that you need that love, attention, affection, and affirmation from your father,
Yes.
especially as a daughter. Sons need it
Mm-hmm.
too. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like they don't. But
Right.
because daughters typically then look for their mates as men,
Mm-hmm.
they're
Exactly.
reflecting what they got and they're accepting oftentimes exactly what they got from their fathers, which is where we get into a little bit of trouble. As you started to grow up as a young woman, navigating the world a little bit more outside of your home, how did that identity that you formed from the pieces of your father that you got, how did that show up in your relationships or even your self image as a young woman?
So it showed up like, so it made me wrong to the point where I was too independent.
Oh,
You
okay.
know, I felt like I didn't need anybody because actually my dad always taught me, well, taught us, and I had two other sisters,
Hmm.
um, never depend on a man for anything. Go out and get it yourself,
Okay.
and that's one thing he instilled in us. So at that point, it made me so strong where I was like, I don't need no man for this, or don't say or do nothing for me. To the
Hmm.
point, like even when I met my now husband, he got out to pump my gas, and I got very offended.
Mm.
Like, I don't need you pumping my gas. I got this. So I was
Right.
very like strong, like so
Yeah.
independent where I felt like I didn't need anyone.
Like hyper independent.
Yes, very hyper independent. Yes,
Yeah.
very.
Almost to almost to a detriment because I think what God would want for us is to be capable and independent, but still be able to stay soft and still be able
Exactly.
to be comfortable as a woman and let a man who loves you do things for
Mm-hmm.
you. And that's a
Yes, it's
hard
like I put that
balance.
wall.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
hard
I put up
balance.
that wall, and
Right.
I'm just like, I feel like because but in the back of my mind, my dad said don't depend on a man.
Mm,
And I literally took that to heart.
yeah. So, one more question about that. How did that potentially sabotage or threaten your ability to build a loving, close, trusting relationship with, I guess, your now husband? Or did it?
Well, I so it did it oh in the beginning, oh my gosh, it almost broke us up because
Mm,
here he was trying to be the man he was raised to be,
mm-hmm.
thoughtful, gentle, and just step in and pick up the gaps, and
Yeah,
I was like, nope, nope, I
I
don't
don't
need
need
you.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and he felt a certain way to the point where we actually broke up. And it wasn't until I felt like I got smacked back into reality. Um, but God literally told me it's okay. It's
Mm,
okay to let your guard down and let him in.
wow.
And that's what I actually wound up doing. But it took a lot in me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried it. I had like half a wall up, half wall down,
Yeah.
and I allowed him to come in, and now 24 years later, we're still here and still together.
Right.
But if it wasn't for God telling me to let him in,
Mm-hmm. And so about when was that turning point? Do you remember about how old or how far you were into your
we were about,
relationship or marriage?
yeah, so and actually into the relationship, we're probably like 2 years in.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, he was very
He
patient
stuck
with me,
around.
like,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, he was very patient. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, any other guy would have been like, girl, bye.
I'm out. I can't deal with
Exactly.
this. Yeah.
Exactly. But think about it
Yeah.
was the hurtful part is I didn't really realize what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't
Yeah.
because like I said, in the back of my mind, it was like I'm doing what daddy told me to do,
Right. Right.
not knowing that I was hurting my relationships.
Mm, yeah. Were there any scriptures in particular or tools, or was there anything that you could grab a hold of when you realized you were fighting that battle that helped you get through it?
Well, I think with like Psalms 34:18,
Oh,
the Lord is
okay.
close to the brokenhearted.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until we split up, it really, really hurt.
Right.
I mean, I was devastated because when he left, he just left. He didn't say why.
Mhm.
And it took me to actually catch up with him because he wouldn't even answer my phone calls.
Wow. He
And
was
then
hurt.
I had to actually run into him one day and I'm like, can we talk? And then he told me, you did this, and that. And I'm like, I did? Like, I didn't even realize it.
Wow.
He told me what I did. And I'm like, I couldn't, like, no, I didn't. No, I did do those things. And he
Mm.
said, all I was doing was trying to be there for you,
Ooh.
but you would not let me in.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It was
And
very hurtful.
how I can imagine that that stung. And you
Yeah.
could have probably easily walked away from it and crawled into your own little hole and gone on about your life. But that obviously isn't what happened. So what
No.
changed in you at that moment that allowed you to let him in?
Well, it allowed me, well, it made me to do a reality check on myself.
Mm,
Like I literally had to go back to the mirror and be like, okay, what's wrong with you? And then all I could do, like, I remember for a couple of days I cried.
mm,
And I was like, God, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this? And then I started asking God to change me,
mhm.
change my ways, and soften my heart because apparently my heart was hardened.
Hardened, yeah.
And I didn't even know, like, and thing about it was, like I said, I didn't realize this.
Right.
And it took like 3 months for
Mm,
me and him to get back together. Like, he literally let me
yeah.
literally do a reality check on myself. Like, and I'm glad
Hmm.
that we got back together, but that 3 months was so hard because I was just like, why? And he told me, he said, you need to check yourself.
Mm,
You need to do a reality check
yeah.
and get right with yourself first before you can let
Exactly.
somebody else in.
Exactly. And that is so that's so powerful, but it's so true because often we don't even see the walls that we put up around ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Those walls are protective. It's not like they're not coming from anywhere. I mean, we're
Mm-hmm.
human, but we can be so busy protecting ourselves from hurt that we don't let love in.
Exactly.
And
Exactly. And
that's
that's
a
exactly
real
what I did.
thing. That's a real
Mm-hmm.
thing. And I love that God didn't give up on you and that your husband
Exactly.
didn't give up on you. He gave you space and said, you need to do this work. He didn't try to rescue you out of it. And I
Exactly.
think,
And
yeah, I think that that is
mm-hmm.
so, so powerful because a lot of men would have just walked and said, I don't have time for this.
Exactly. And I
There's
thank
tens
God
of
for
women
that.
out there, women, tens and tens of women that I could go and be with. So if she's
Mm-hmm.
broken, I don't have time to wait for her to get fixed.
Right.
But God's love for us sometimes shows up in ways that we can't even imagine that it might. And it
Uh-huh.
sounds like your husband was sent to you to help you heal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because like I said, we were still boyfriend and girlfriend at the time, but I couldn't imagine how it would have been if we would have been married and that had
Mm,
happened. You
right.
know what I'm saying? So it was definitely needed before we got married, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's powerful. Thank you so much for letting us in and sharing that. And I think there's a lot of takeaways from that story, and they'll look very different for each and every person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about my own story and being willing to trust again after father wounds, because I had almost a little bit different experience as a young girl who had father wounds. He wasn't necessarily wounding directly to us as children, but it was my mom who was the recipient of his hurt and his pain. And we watched a lot of that, and we saw things that a lot of children should never really see. And what that did for me is that made me crave male attention. So almost
Mm-hmm.
the opposite reaction. And I ended up in relationships and situations that I had no business being in at a young age. So it's interesting how some of the same wounds can show up differently for different people. And that's why the
Yeah.
power of self awareness and really examining how you reacted to your situations can help you break free from that and know what to
Mhm.
pray for when you're praying for God's intervention and healing and help. Um,
Exactly. And that is so true.
yeah, it's absolutely, I think, true. And so another question, one of the last few questions that I have for you is there any part of that story that either made you feel shame or made you feel embarrassed that now you can look at and feel power and faith from?
Well, I would have to say the part about being like that hyper independence part of it, I'm not embarrassed of it, because it actually helped me to, like I said, go back and re-examine myself. So I need
Mm-hmm.
to do a reality check on myself.
Mm-hmm.
So me carrying that into not just a relationship, but what about my, being a parent, you
Right.
know? So me having four kids and everything, I had to learn how to, oh my gosh, be more patient,
Mm-hmm.
and really, really listen to my kids. Like when they would come to me with something, I could not be this, no, get away from me, or no, just being very mean. I had to
Mm-hmm.
be patient
Right.
and listen.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so that was the huge part for me. And this is thinking about like other relationships as well, friendships,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But when I think about back to some of the friendships that I had, I probably should have put up that wall. Put it back
Yeah,
up
we
because
know some of those.
exactly, because like, gosh, some of people like I let in that probably should not have been there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, oh Lord, I think I put my wall down too far.
Right.
So I
Right.
had to raise it back up because
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, it got really bad to, I felt like I was being used
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. And I had to close the door on some of those relationships,
Right.
friendships, and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to say, I thank God for my mother because she instilled God in me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like at an early age, at the age of 3.
Wow.
We had to go to church. There
Mm-hmm.
was no, oh, you're gonna stay home. No, you had to go. The
Okay.
age was 3. That way you can sit there and be still. That's the age she thought.
Right.
And that was so hard. But um,
Yes.
you
Anybody who
know,
has a
so
3-year-old knows.
so having 5 kids and taking them all to church,
Mm-hmm.
and we sat there and she instilled God in us, like
Yeah.
literally. And so she built my foundation,
Right.
you know. And
Right.
I, like I said, I thank God for her. And I told her, like a couple of years ago, I said, Mommy, thank you. And she said, for
Mm.
what? And I said, instilling
Oh.
God in us, because had I not had God, I wouldn't have not known how to handle a lot of these situations.
Right.
I would not have known to go back and pray and ask God for certain things, or to change certain things, or even to change me.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the most important thing that I could say I actually had, was my mother instilling God in us.
Love that. Love that.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's going to hit home, I think, for a lot of people and for a lot of people who didn't and have to figure out how to do it anyway. Um,
Hmm.
you just can't control All you can control are your choices and where you decide to go. So I have another question, and it's maybe a little bit lighter one. We
Mhm.
think about all of this as heavy, and it is because it's life choices and it's things that we have no control over that have happened to us and happened in our lives as children that are still following us into our adulthood. But is there a moment in pop culture, and that could be a song or a scene from a movie or a quote or something in modern times that actually captures the essence of father wounds for you? When you see it or hear it or come across it, you realize that it can be very relatable to a father wound.
So yes, so it actually brings me back to the song Glory. Remember the
Mm,
movie Selma? That
yes.
song was by Common and John Legend.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It speaks to us like through struggle and hope.
Right.
Like you know what I'm saying? It really talks to you, reminds you that a father wound can, connect in generational pain, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the one I was thinking about. And then also, I don't know if you remember, I think it was 2016, I think it was, the movie called Fences with Denzel
Oh,
Washington
oh,
and
girl.
Maxon.
That movie was powerful.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
Denzel and Viola,
Mm-hmm.
like, that's a power cast right there. And then the writing
Exactly.
and the acting and the storyline, very moving. Now you're going to make me have to go watch that movie this weekend and
But I
cry
just
and be all the
love,
things.
yes, because I loved how that movie made you look at how father, passed down wounds,
Hmm.
um, passing down the wounds through the generations,
Exactly.
you know, and
Exactly.
that was a powerful movie. I love that movie.
Gosh. Yeah, now you got me. You got me. I got to go back. That was a good one. I'm going to have to rewatch that this weekend. When I was preparing to ask that question, I started thinking about it myself. And from a different lens, a different angle, the movie that first popped up when I thought about that question, it's a little bit older movie. Will Smith was in it. It was called The Pursuit of Happiness.
Oh, yes.
And when I think about how that man would have done anything to provide for
Mm-hmm.
him and his child. And I think about how every child really yearns for a father that would walk through the fire for them, who would fight for
Mm-hmm.
them, who would take any job necessary for them, even die for them. And every time I watch that movie, I mean, every time, 10 times out of 10 times, I feel the commitment that that character that Will Smith played, the commitment he had to being a father and
Mm-hmm.
protecting and providing for his child at all costs. And I pray that every child out there, regardless of their situation, regardless of what their parent might be going through, would feel that kind of love and commitment and willingness to do whatever it takes to keep their
Exactly.
child with them and provide for them. And so I feel very thankful that while you went through a lot of the struggles that you did with your father, that he was there to provide and
Mm-hmm.
he didn't waver in that commitment to you and your family. So
Exactly.
despite all of the struggles that caused in growing you and God having to intervene and speak to you, I'm grateful that he didn't abandon you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then also made me, because okay, even though my father was there,
Hmm.
I had family members and actually friends as well that their fathers were not.
Right.
And I got to experience that at firsthand, what that felt like, because I would like my friend, I would come home from school with her,
Hmm.
and only her mom was there.
Right.
And I remember saying, "Where's your dad?" And she would look at me like, "What?" You know, and I'm like I felt like I said a curse word or something,
Hmm.
and she goes, "My dad's not here." My dad was never here.
Right.
I don't know who my dad is.
Yeah. That's all she had ever known.
Yep, that's all she ever known. And so I felt bad for seeing stuff like that, But
Hmm.
then also, like, I have family members and stuff like that that were, or a friend, another friend, that her mom was being abused.
Right.
And so I was kind of glad her dad was not there,
Right.
because then he would start drinking and take it out on all of them.
Exactly. My experience was more similar to that. And it's hard because you feel this push and pull. My father was an alcoholic and he was abusive toward my mother. And I remember being so torn because there were friends who didn't have their father at home. They didn't know what was going on in our home. And so they were sort of jealous of the fact that I had a father. And yes, he still provided financially so that we could have. But I remember wishing he wasn't there because of the pain and the tragedy and just the trauma that was caused in that house. And so it's very complicated, and kids don't really know what to do with that. They wish for things because they think it would be easier, but they don't understand, what's going on under the surface of these adults. And, mothers are the ones who carry and bear children. Fathers have a
Right.
different role in parenting, and it's complicated. And so, what I would like to offer, and then I would love to ask you as we get ready to close, I'd like to offer to our listeners to know, number one, that whatever your situation, it's real for you. And it might be hard for you, even though it's not hard for someone else, or someone else can tell you, well, why don't you just do this? We understand that these things are complicated and they take a lot
Hmm.
of unpacking and prayer and someone to walk along that journey with you to help guide you along it because it can be scary and difficult. And so, what I would ask for you as we get ready to close is how can people find you? Um, Again, I shared your podcast, but I want you to talk a little bit about it. And where can they find your community? We talk a little bit about our community here on Bounce Back Black Women, but for my listeners who specifically are battling father wounds and history of father wounds, where can they find you?
Alrighty, so you can find me on Through My Father's Eyes on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast at. Also, we were diving deep to father was in healing, on
Hmm.
whether he walked away, he was never there, or he passed away.
Right.
And then also my community is Through My Father's Eyes Healing Community, and
Okay.
that's off on Facebook.
Great.
So
Great.
you can
So
always
it's a
find us
group,
there.
a Facebook group. What I'll do,
Yes.
Marcel, is I'll link both of those in the show notes. So anybody who is wanting to seek out your podcast, listen, I definitely recommend 10 out of 10. I listen to it and it helps me in that area of my life, even though, I talk about all kinds of heartbreak. That focus on father wounds is really important if that's something that you've walked through. So I would encourage
Yes.
anybody who is dealing with that or the aftermath of that to find you. And so
Thank you.
I'm going to wrap us up, but I am so grateful for you coming on and talking with us. I hope that you continue to touch the lives and the hearts of many, many women who, some of which may not even realize that it's the father wound that's showing up over and over again for them. So thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And, I'll see you. We talk throughout the week many times. So have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon. Well, that's it for today, my friend. I really hope this episode inspired, encouraged, or just plain comforted you. If so, please share it with a friend who might be struggling in her own healing journey. And if you take a moment to leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts, you'll help other women find encouragement through their heartbreak. Remember that God is holding your hand along this journey, and guess what? I'm holding the other. Life is short, so bounce back, Black woman.